Grant hesitated for a moment before replying. We've integrated advanced artificial intelligence into our ships. AIs that learn and evolve based on every encounter. They can predict enemy movements and suggest countermeasures before the enemy even knows what's happening. It's not just about technology, though. It's about the minds behind the ships. Humans who are always thinking, always adapting to new challenges. Kor, the Thor general, who had been quiet until now, grunted and crossed his arms. You rely on machines to win battles. How does that make you stronger than the rest of us? Grant's eyes met his, and she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It's not the machines, General. It's how we use them. The intelligence of humanity is our greatest asset. We think faster, we adapt quicker, and we do it in ways that others don't expect. We see things differently. The Thor general snorted, but he could not deny the logic of her words. He had never thought of warfare that way before. Never thought that a species could win with strategy and intelligence rather than sheer force. It made sense, but it was hard to accept. The silence in the room deepened as the alien commanders exchanged glances. The truth was undeniable. The human fleet had done something they had never seen before. They had won with a combination of ingenuity, technology, and resourcefulness. Then Tessa spoke again, her voice more serious than before. Commodore Grant, we cannot ignore what you've shown us. Your fleet is stronger than we originally thought. Your ability to outmaneuver us was impressive, and your strategy is unlike anything we've seen. What we want to know now is how you intend to use this power. Are you here just to prove a point, or are you planning to make a move on the galaxy? Grant looked at Tessa, then at the other commanders, her expression unchanging. We are not here to conquer the galaxy. We are here to be part of it. But make no mistake, we will not sit idly by. We have shown you that we are capable of much more than you believed. If we are to be part of this galaxy, it will be as equals, not as subordinates. Her words carried weight, and they were heard by everyone in the room. Earth wasn't asking for a handout or for permission to join the galactic community. They were declaring that they had earned their place among the stars, and they wouldn't settle for anything less. Kor finally spoke again, his voice surprisingly calm. You want to be treated as equals, but there is something more. You've proven your strength, yes. But what is your long-term plan? How do you see the future of Earth in this galaxy? Grant's eyes gleamed with quiet confidence. Our long-term plan is simple. Peace. We will not seek war, but we will stand our ground. We will not allow ourselves to be pushed around or treated as lesser beings, and we will use our intelligence, our technology, and our adaptability to help ensure the future of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. There was a long pause, and for the first time, the commanders seemed to understand. The humans were not just a small, insignificant species that had stumbled into power by chance. They had earned their place through hard work, determination, and the ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. After a moment of silence, Tessa nodded. I see now that we were wrong to underestimate you. Earth's fleet is a force to be reckoned with, and we would be wise to consider an alliance. The word hung in the air, and the others in the room exchanged uncertain looks. But one by one, they nodded, acknowledging the truth in Tessa's statement. For the first time, the humans were being seen not as an afterthought, not as a small species in a vast galaxy, but as equals, worthy of respect, worthy of an alliance. Commodore Grant gave a small nod, her eyes never leaving Tessa's. An alliance, then. But remember, this is just the beginning. Earth will stand strong, and we will work together with those who are willing to accept us as equals. The meeting had concluded, and the galaxy's leaders were left with much to consider. For the first time in recorded history, Earth had forced the galaxy to recognize its strength. No longer would humanity be seen as a young, weak species struggling to find its place in the stars. They had proven, beyond any doubt, that they belonged. Commodore Elise Grant walked slowly down the long corridor of her flagship, her steps echoing in the stillness. She was deep in thought, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. The galaxy had accepted Earth as a potential ally. It was a huge victory, but it was just the beginning. Grant knew that Earth's place among the stars would be tested. The hard part was still ahead. At first, the alien fleets tried to target the human ships with their heavy artillery, launching blast after blast at the tiny, agile vessels. But each time, the human ships seemed to disappear into thin air, only to reappear in a new position, safe from the incoming fire. It wasn't just evasive maneuvering. It was something far more sophisticated. Impossible, Tessa muttered again, as the human ships continued to avoid the oncoming fire with ease. The alien fleets were unable to land a single blow. There was something about the human ships that made them almost untouchable. It wasn't just their speed. It was their ability to predict the trajectory of the enemy's fire and adjust their position before the shots even reached them. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The human fleet, once laughed at and mocked, was now the center of attention. Every movement, every turn, every change in direction was being analyzed by the galaxy's best military minds. But still, no one could figure out how the humans were accomplishing it. On the battlefield, the human ships continued to perform flawlessly, darting in and out of enemy fire with unmatched precision. Elise Grant knew exactly what was happening. Her ships weren't just faster, they were smarter. The humans had developed an advanced AI system, integrated into each ship's core, that allowed them to anticipate enemy movements with a level of accuracy that defied expectations. The AI could predict the path of incoming fire and make adjustments in real time, guiding the ships to safety before the enemy even knew what was happening. It wasn't just the AI, though. The human fleet was also equipped with an innovative cloaking system, one that didn't just make the ships invisible, but allowed them to appear in places they shouldn't have been, adding another layer of confusion for their enemies. The alien fleets, still assuming the humans were nothing more than small, weak ships, couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. For the first time, the galaxy's greatest commanders were beginning to understand that the humans had been holding back, hiding their true capabilities. As the battle simulation continued, the human fleet's speed and precision began to show their true value. The larger enemy ships, with their heavy weapons and bulky frames, struggled to keep up with the nimble human vessels. One by one, the larger ships were outmaneuvered, their weapons useless against the unpredictable movements of the humans. Kor, the Drak-Thor general, had been watching from the sidelines, but now he stood, his claws scraping the floor in frustration. "This is no accident," he growled. "They're using technology we haven't seen before. There's something different about them." Tessa nodded slowly, her energy form shimmering with an almost nervous energy. "They're not just hiding something. They're playing a game that we don't even know how to play." As the simulation came to a close, the human fleet stood victorious. The opposing forces, once so sure of their superiority, were left dumbfounded. The human ships hadn't just survived, they had completely outclassed their enemies in every sense. For a moment, the room was silent. No one knew what to say, and no one dared to break the silence. But the realization was beginning to settle in. The humans were no longer the joke they had been a few days ago. They had just proven that they were not to be underestimated. Commodore Elise Grant stood tall on the viewing platform, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to say anything. The humans had spoken with their actions. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The dust had not yet settled from the combat simulation, but already the atmosphere in the Grand Assembly Hall had changed. No one laughed at Earth's fleet anymore. The silence that had filled the room after the simulation was broken only by whispers of disbelief and confusion. The tiny human ships, once seen as an embarrassing show of weakness, had turned the tables on the galaxy's most powerful fleets, proving that size didn't always matter in war. Commodore Elise Grant stood at the front of her flagship, her eyes scanning the stunned faces of the alien dignitaries who had gathered to witness Earth's display. She remained calm, as always, but there was a small, quiet satisfaction in the way she held herself. Her fleet had proven its worth, and now the galaxy could see that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The next phase of the fleet review was about to begin. This time, however, it would not be a simulation. The humans would be demonstrating their true power, and this time, no one was laughing. And the best part, the human ships were still moving, still dodging, still avoiding any counterattack. The other fleets, stunned by the effectiveness of the human weapons, began to retreat. They tried to regroup, to come up with a new strategy, but it was too late. The humans had already proven their point. As the human fleet swept across the battlefield, the alien ships fell one by one. The tiny fleet, once mocked and underestimated, was now on the verge of complete victory. The galaxy's most powerful fleets, each with their advanced technology and massive firepower, had been outsmarted by the smallest fleet in the arena. And with that, the final blow was struck. The last of the alien ships fell to the humans' precise energy pulses, and the battlefield was silent. Commodore Grant stood at the front of her flagship, watching as her fleet gathered. She didn't need to speak. Her actions had said everything that needed to be said. Humanity had just shown the galaxy that they weren't just a fledgling species anymore. They were a force to be reckoned with. The quiet after the battle was almost deafening. The alien fleets, once so confident in their superiority, had been utterly humbled by the small human ships. The battlefield, once alive with flashing lights and explosions, now lay in eerie stillness. Earth's fleet had triumphed, but the shock was palpable. Alien commanders, their pride bruised, couldn't even speak. What had just happened? Commodore Elise Grant stood tall on the bridge of her flagship, her eyes scanning the vast emptiness where once the great fleets had fought. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her fleet had proven its worth without a single boast or flourish. The galaxy would now understand that humanity had come of age, and there was no going back. The other fleet commanders were still in a daze, trying to process what had just occurred. The larger warships, each a marvel of advanced technology, had been rendered powerless by the seemingly small, insignificant human ships. It was as if the laws of combat had been rewritten before their eyes. The human fleet hadn't just survived. They had dominated. Kor, the Drak-Thor general, was the first to speak, his voice low and growling. "This is impossible. How did they do it? Their ships shouldn't even have been able to withstand our firepower, let alone defeat us." Tessa, the Valorian admiral, was equally stunned, her form flickering with disbelief. They didn't just survive. They knew exactly where to strike. Their weapons weren't powerful in the traditional sense. They used precision. They focused on disabling us, not destroying us. The Valorian admiral shook her head, still trying to grasp what had happened. But how? How did they do it? And why didn't we see it coming? The question hung in the air, unanswered. For the first time in their careers, the galaxy's greatest military minds were left speechless. The human fleet had done something no one had expected, something that had shaken the very foundations of warfare in the galaxy. They had taken a fleet that was vastly outnumbered and outgunned, and with nothing more than precision, strategy, and advanced technology, they had defeated their enemies. Meanwhile, in the heart of Earth's fleet, the humans were not celebrating. There were no loud cheers or shouts of triumph. Commodore Grant's face remained as calm as ever, her eyes scanning the readings on her display. Her fleet had won, but she knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was watching, and Earth's victory would have consequences. The other fleets would be furious. They would want answers. They would want to know how the humans had done it. Grant looked to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Reynolds, who stood beside her with a slight smile on his face. "We did it," he said softly, but there was no sense of arrogance in his voice, just quiet satisfaction. "We've only shown them the tip of the iceberg," Grant replied, her voice steady and resolute. "We've proven that we can fight on equal footing, but there is still much to be done. The galaxy will not simply accept our victory. They will want to test us again. Reynolds nodded. And we will be ready. At that moment, the communication system buzzed to life. A message was coming through from the Valorian fleet, the most powerful of all the galactic forces. The message was not a request for a rematch or an angry demand for an explanation. No, it was far more respectful. It was an invitation. Tessa's voice came through the speaker, her tone measured. Commodore Grant, I would like to request a private meeting. It is clear that the humans are not the fleet we believe them to be. I need to understand how you accomplished this. How did you defeat us? We need to talk. The fleet commanders from other species had watched the human ship's movements with growing unease. Their performance in the combat simulation had been flawless, but now they were about to face an even greater test, a live demonstration of their capabilities. The other fleets, still trying to make sense of the humans' strange tactics, were ready to show off their strength in a way that left no room for doubt. The arena was set up for a real-life, live-fire demonstration. The human ships, still smaller than most, lined up on the outer edges of the simulated battlefield, while the larger fleets took center stage. It seemed that Earth's fleet would once again be outnumbered, outgunned, and overpowered. But there was a subtle shift in the air, a sense that something was different this time. Commodore Grant stepped forward, speaking to the assembly in calm but steady tones. Today, you will see that we are more than a collection of small ships. We are a united force, a force that uses brains as much as brawn. Watch closely, and you will see why we are not to be underestimated. Her words were met with a mixture of polite applause and skeptical glances. The larger fleets had already shown off their might, and now it was time for the humans to prove that they could do more than just dance around their enemies. There was still doubt, still a lingering belief that the human ships were nothing but clever tricks and technology that would crumble when faced with real combat. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The simulation began, and the alien fleets rushed forward, eager to show their dominance. Massive warships with enormous weapons and energy shields charged at the human ships, ready to overwhelm them. The galaxy's most powerful fleets moved with great speed, their weapons primed and ready for action. They expected the tiny human ships to scatter, to run and hide, just as they had seen in the mock battles. But once again, the humans surprised them. Instead of fleeing, the human ships formed up into tight, coordinated formations. It was a calm, controlled movement, each ship moving as if they were part of a single organism. The alien commanders watched in confusion, their ships ready to fire, but they hesitated. The humans weren't running. They weren't giving up. They were standing their ground. Fire, one of the fleet commanders yelled, and his ship's massive cannons unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, aimed straight at the human fleet. The blast shook the very air of the arena as it streaked toward the tiny ships. But instead of being hit, the human ships dodged with ease. They didn't just move out of the way. They moved around the blasts, weaving in and out of the incoming fire as if they were made of liquid. The blasts missed by mere inches, and the human ships seemed to blink in and out of existence, reappearing in new positions as if they were never in danger in the first place. The alien fleets fired again, and again, and again, but each time, the humans evaded the incoming fire with perfect timing. It was as if the human fleet was constantly one step ahead, always anticipating the next move, always dodging the attacks before they even arrived. The crowd watched, mesmerized. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Fleet Reviews, it was the tiny human ships that were commanding all the attention. The larger fleets, with all their firepower and size, seemed slow and clumsy in comparison. The human ships were agile, fast, and above all, precise. And then, just when it seemed like the humans were going to dodge their way to victory, something unexpected happened. The human ships, still evading fire with their incredible speed, began to counterattack. But they didn't fire enormous blasts of energy like the other fleets. Instead, they used something far more dangerous, something the alien fleets had never seen before. The human ships released what appeared to be tiny, almost invisible pulses of energy, much smaller than the massive cannons of the other ships. But when these pulses hit their targets, they caused devastating damage. The alien warships that had been firing at the humans suddenly began to flicker and fade. Shields cracked. Engines sputtered. Some ships even started to spin out of control, their systems failing as if they had been hit by an unseen hand. "What is this?" Tessa, the Valorian admiral, gasped. "Their weapons don't make sense. They're too small to be doing this kind of damage." But the damage was undeniable. The human ships had found a way to cripple the larger fleets with their precise, pinpoint strikes, targeting weak points in enemy ships and disabling their systems. It was a method of warfare that focused not on sheer destruction, but on crippling the enemy's ability to fight back. The crowd of alien dignitaries exchanged worried glances. They had all assumed that Earth's fleet was an afterthought, a group of poorly equipped ships with no real power. But now, something in the humans' tactics suggested they were hiding a significant advantage. No one could yet put their finger on it, but the mystery of the human fleet was growing with every passing second. Meanwhile, on the viewing platform, Elise remained silent, her eyes cold and unblinking. The light from her ship's hull shimmered against her face, casting an almost otherworldly glow. She had not come to the fleet review to boast or to intimidate. She had come to show one simple truth. Humanity may have been young, but it was not to be underestimated. The human fleet continued to move, and the glow grew stronger. It wasn't just light. It was an energy field, a subtle force that seemed to make the human ships appear even more impressive than they had moments before. Alien sensors were trying to detect any sign of technology, anything that could explain the strange phenomenon. But nothing appeared. No extra energy emissions, no strange signals. It was as though the human ships were simply different. As the humans moved in their quiet dance across the sky, the other fleet commanders began to wonder. Was this part of the plan? Or was it something even more dangerous that the humans had yet to reveal? The tension in the air was palpable. The galaxy's greatest fleets, each with their own pride and history, were all trying to piece together what the human fleet was doing, and each alien officer felt a knot growing in their stomach, knowing that they had underestimated the humans. But they weren't sure how. How had these tiny ships, with no apparent weapons, become so much more than just a curiosity? And as the day continued, it became clear Earth's fleet was not here to simply participate in the review. It was here to change the way the galaxy saw humanity forever. The day had come for the human fleet to demonstrate its abilities in the most important part of the review, the combat simulations. The atmosphere in the Grand Assembly Hall was tense. There was a quiet uncertainty in the air, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. No one knew exactly what to expect, but one thing was certain: the human fleet was not what anyone had originally thought. After 2 days of dazzling demonstrations by the larger, more established species, it was time for Earth's fleet to take the stage. The question on everyone's mind was simple: how would these small, unassuming ships fare in a true combat situation? The aliens watched in silence as the human ships, their sleek forms still glowing faintly, positioned themselves on the edge of the simulated battlefield. There were no large guns or flashy weapons visible, no shields pulsing with energy like the other fleets had. The human ships were still the smallest, the least impressive in size, but something about them had changed in the eyes of the galaxy's commanders. They were no longer seen as an easy target. Commodore Elise Grant stood at the helm of her flagship, her expression calm and composed. She had given no instructions to her fleet. She knew that the ships under her command were ready. Her crew had trained for this moment for years, and they were prepared for whatever the alien fleets could throw at them. The simulated combat began with a sudden explosion of energy as the opposing fleets charged toward the human ships. The first wave of alien warships came in fast, their massive frames cutting through space like hungry predators. The fleet commanders from the larger species grinned at what they assumed would be an easy victory. After all, The humans had no chance against ships of that size, right? But then something unexpected happened. The human ships moved, not in a clumsy panic, but with controlled, deliberate precision. They didn't rush into battle or fire wildly. Instead, they performed a series of sharp, calculated turns, each ship darting in and out of the enemy's line of sight with an agility that seemed almost unnatural. The enemy ships, larger and bulkier, struggled to keep up. "This is absurd," Kor, the Drak Thor general, muttered under his breath. He had seen many different fleets in his time, but none had ever moved with such speed and grace. It was like the human ships were dancing through space, every move coordinated to perfection. The Valorian admiral, Tessa, watched in stunned silence as the human ships dodged enemy fire with an almost unnatural ease. How are they doing that? She whispered to herself, her energy-based form flickering in surprise. No ship should be able to maneuver like that without some kind of advanced technology. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a sudden flicker in their movements, a shift in their formations. But then, with stunning precision, the human ships began to dart across the battlefield, their small frames making quick, evasive maneuvers that none of the other fleets could match. The aliens were momentarily caught off guard as the tiny ships blinked in and out of visibility, their cloaking systems engaging with lightning speed. It was no longer a display of size, but a display of something else. A raw, unexpected power that seemed to come from nowhere. For the first time in the event, the alien spectators started paying close attention, their mocking tone turning to a nervous curiosity. The humans weren't just playing. They were preparing for something far greater than anyone had anticipated. The second day of the fleet review began with an air of confusion. The galaxy's elite were still reeling from the surprising movements of the human fleet the previous day. No one could understand how the small ships had performed the impossible, dodging attacks and executing moves that seemed to defy logic. Commodore Elise Grant had not given any further explanations. She simply stood silent, watching as the representatives from other fleets looked at her with renewed suspicion and curiosity. The aliens still mocked the tiny fleet, but there was a strange unease in the way they now whispered about Earth's ships. The review continued with larger fleets demonstrating their firepower, showing off massive cannons, shields that could withstand even the most powerful of blows, and advanced weaponry that sent shivers down the spines of many. Some of the ships were so big that they could carry entire fleets within their hulls. Every display was louder, more impressive, and meant to strike fear into any would-be enemies. But when it was Earth's turn again, the mood in the crowd shifted. It was as if the humans had quietly earned the attention of the galaxy's most powerful species. The question on everyone's mind was simple: how had they done it? The tiny human ships glided silently into position once again. This time, they weren't taking part in the mock battles. Instead, they were simply circling the area in perfect, almost graceful patterns. No weapons were visible. There was no booming sound of engines revving or shields humming to life. The ships were eerily quiet, as though they were almost waiting. Tessa, the Valorian admiral, leaned forward in her seat, her energy-based form flickering with faint signals. "What do they think they're doing?" she asked, her tone slightly more serious now. "They are not even displaying weapons." Kor, the Drak Thor general, scoffed, his deep voice rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. "They don't need weapons to die. Their ships are nothing more than toys. The rest of us will show them the power of true warfare." Despite the arrogance in his words, the Drak Thor general couldn't completely mask the uneasy feeling that gnawed at him. He had seen military displays from dozens of species, and Earth's fleet, while small, had shown something different, a kind of precision and control that suggested there was much more at play here than met the eye. At that moment, the human fleet made its first move. It wasn't fast or flashy. Instead, it was a calm and deliberate shift in formation, a simple change of direction. But as the ships moved, something remarkable happened. The ships began to glow, not brightly, but in a way that was subtle, almost hypnotic. The light wasn't coming from their outer hulls, but from deep within, as though something powerful was hidden beneath the surface. The crowd in the assembly hall fell silent. "What in the stars is that?" Kor muttered under his breath, his yellow eyes narrowing as he observed the glow. The human ships didn't show off weapons or shields. They simply moved. With astonishing precision, they executed maneuvers that seemed impossible for such small vessels. The ships moved in perfect coordination, not a single one veering off course, as if they were being controlled by one single mind. It was clear that this wasn't just an impressive display of skill. This was something different, something that couldn't be explained by conventional tactics or strategy. Elise Grant stood at the front of her flagship, watching the reactions of the other species. She knew they were confused. She knew they were starting to wonder if Earth had something hidden, something that they hadn't shared with anyone yet. The tiny fleet, now glowing with energy, began to take on a different aura. They weren't just small, they were different. "How are they doing this?" whispered Tessa, her voice strained. She had seen the best fleets in the galaxy perform similar maneuvers, but never with such ease, such grace, and without any visible weapons. The words were carefully chosen. Tessa had once been a proud leader of a fleet that had never lost a battle, but now she was coming to the humans, asking for their secrets. The tables had turned, and for the first time in her life, she was seeking knowledge from someone she once considered beneath her. Grant considered the request for a moment. The humans had nothing to hide. It was not their way to keep secrets, especially now that the galaxy had seen their true power. She had nothing to fear from such a meeting. "I'll be there," she replied simply, then cut the connection. "Well," Reynolds said, raising an eyebrow, "I suppose we should get ready to give them a few answers." Grant turned to him. "Not answers. Information. There's a difference." The human fleet began to regroup, moving into position for the next phase of the review. But all eyes were now on them, not just the other fleets, but the entire galaxy. The humans had become a symbol of something new, a species that had risen from the ashes of war, of mistakes and failed attempts, and now stood as equals among the stars. Their power was not in their size, not in their weapons, but in their minds and their ability to adapt. They had outsmarted their enemies, and in doing so, they had earned the respect of those who once considered them nothing more than a curiosity. Elsewhere, the other fleets were already talking among themselves. They were still reeling from the shock of the human victory. The great leaders of the galaxy, those who had once believed they were untouchable, were now asking themselves the same question. What had the humans discovered? What was it that made them so different? The answer, it seemed, was simple. Humanity had discovered the power of intelligence over sheer strength. While the alien fleets relied on size, firepower, and brute force, the humans had learned to fight with precision, strategy, and technology that no one had anticipated. As the galaxy's leaders discussed the human victory, there was a quiet, unspoken understanding that had begun to settle in. Earth was no longer a small, insignificant world. Humanity had become a new power in the galaxy, one that could not be ignored. The atmosphere in the grand meeting hall was thick with tension. Representatives from the galaxy's most powerful fleets had gathered for the meeting with the human fleet. The unexpected victory of Earth's ships had left everyone stunned. And now, all eyes were on Commodore Elise Grant. Her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the anxiety buzzing around the room. Tessa, the Valorian admiral, was the first to speak as the human delegation entered the meeting room. She had requested this meeting, and now she stood, waiting for Commodore Grant. The Valorians were known for their immense power and their strategic brilliance, but even Tessa was unsure of how to approach the humans now. Her previous belief that the human fleet was nothing more than an easy target had been shattered, and now she needed answers. "Commodore Grant," Tessa began, her voice steady but with a hint of curiosity. "I have to admit, I'm impressed. What you did in the simulation, and then again in the live demonstration, was nothing short of extraordinary. I need to know more. How did you defeat us?" The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at the humans. The other fleet commanders from various species, still reeling from the unexpected defeat, watched closely. This was no longer a question of tactics. It was about learning from a species that had managed to outperform the greatest military minds in the galaxy. Commodore Grant smiled slightly, a glint of pride in her eyes. "I understand your confusion, Admiral," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But it wasn't just about defeating you. It's about showing that we have the ability to think outside the box to adapt. Our victory wasn't just about technology, or size, or firepower. It was about using what we had and understanding the battlefield better than anyone else." Tessa's brows furrowed in thought. "You're saying it's not just the ships, not just the weapons. You outmaneuvered us, yes, but how did you do it with such precision?" Grant stood tall and composed, her eyes scanning the alien leaders. "We humans have learned to rely on more than just brute force. Our technology is advanced, yes, but it's also built around adaptability. We didn't just design ships to be fast or strong. We designed them to think, to anticipate, and to outsmart our enemies." The room was silent for a moment as the commanders processed her words. The Valorian admiral, still trying to comprehend how a fleet with such small ships could accomplish what they had, finally spoke again. "I understand the importance of strategy and adaptability," Tessa said slowly, her voice thoughtful. "But there must be more to it. What kind of technology allows you to anticipate our moves so precisely?" The grand halls of the Galactic Assembly were filled with the hum of excitement as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the greatest fleet review ever organized. In every corner of the galaxy, mighty empires and powerful races had sent their finest warships to showcase their strength. Alien species, from the towering and reptilian Drakthor to the sleek, energy-based Valorians, were all present, their ships filling the skies above the massive spaceport. It was an event that drew attention from all corners of the galaxy. Each fleet was a testament to its species' military might. Massive warships bristled with advanced weaponry, gleaming under the bright stars. The high-ranking officers aboard these ships carried a proud, almost arrogant demeanor, knowing their fleets were unmatched. Powerful engines, energy shields, and heavy artillery gave each ship an imposing presence. The atmosphere in the spaceport was one of quiet confidence, until it was time for Earth's fleet to be revealed. A hush fell over the assembly as the announcement was made. "And now, the Terran Federation will present their fleet." Some of the alien dignitaries couldn't hide their snickers. The humans, a relatively young species on the galactic stage, had earned a reputation for being resourceful, but were still seen as weak and lacking the grand military technology of their older neighbors. All eyes turned toward the docking bay, where Earth's fleet was slowly emerging. It wasn't much, just a handful of ships. They were small, compact, and looked almost out of place among the enormous vessels from other empires. A few of the aliens couldn't help but laugh aloud as the ships took to the sky. "They're calling this a fleet," murmured Kor, a tall Drakthor general. His dark scales glistened in the light as he stared at the human ships, a handful of glorified shuttles. Beside him, a Valorian admiral named Tessa raised an eyebrow. "I think they're just here for show," she replied, her voice tinged with amusement. Her sleek, energy-based form flickered slightly as she watched the tiny ships drift into position. The human ships were simple in design, sleek, reflective, almost elegant, but they lacked the bulk of the larger warships that surrounded them. No enormous cannons lined their hulls. There were no bright, dangerous-looking energy fields surrounding their edges. Instead, the human vessels seemed almost minimalist. Some had wondered if they were just recon ships or civilian transports that had mistakenly been included in the fleet review. At the helm of the tiny fleet was Commodore Elise Grant, a woman known for her calm demeanor and sharp intellect. As she stepped out of her ship and onto the viewing platform, the eyes of the galaxy were fixed on her. Unlike many of the dignitaries, who were dressed in elaborate uniforms, Elise wore only a simple, tailored outfit. She didn't seem worried at all about the laughter or mockery that was slowly building in the crowd. She stepped forward to address the audience, her voice calm and steady. "We, the people of Earth, are a young species, still growing and learning. But our strength lies not in the size of our ships, but in the ingenuity of our minds." Her words were met with polite applause, though the snickers continued. The larger species exchanged glances and whispered among themselves. They had seen plenty of smaller fleets in their time. Most of them were easily crushed in the galaxy's endless wars. Earth's fleet seemed no different. A strange thing began to happen, though, as the humans prepared for their demonstration. The ships, despite their size, began to move with a precision and grace that made even the most seasoned military commanders uneasy. They did not rush into battle like the larger fleets, nor did they boast their power. Instead, the humans began to form perfect patterns in space, their ships moving in sync with one another like dancers. The alien officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, trying to make sense of the seemingly strange maneuvers. What was going on? Why did the humans refuse to follow the traditional combat formations? The larger ships bristled with weapons, but the humans' fleet had nothing to show but smooth lines and sharp turns. "They don't even know how to fight," Kor grumbled under his breath. "Look at them, moving in circles like children." "Give it time," Tessa said, her voice colder now. "They have something we don't yet understand." For a moment, the humans did nothing. Their ships simply glided through space, remaining eerily still. The rest of the fleet review proceeded with various demonstrations of firepower and maneuvering, and the crowd watched with mild interest. But when it was time for the humans to show what their tiny fleet could do, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. Elise Grant gave a brief signal, and without warning, the human fleet sprang to life.